The first thing I inherited was the silence. 1,600 acres of it. Pine trees, dry pasture, a creek that only carried real water after spring rain, old fence lines leaning into brush, and a hunting trail my uncle cut 30 years earlier and never named. It was land so wide and quiet that the wind seemed to move through it in layers. My uncle had owned it almost my whole life, and when he passed, the probate process took months. There were appraisals, tax papers, boundary notes, mineral questions, and a stack of documents so thick I started carrying them in a banker's box. By the time the court finally signed off, and the deed was recorded in my name, I did not feel rich. I felt responsible. So, I drove out to walk the edges. That was all I meant to do. Check the gates, photograph the fences, see which trails were still open, and find out where the neighboring subdivision stopped and my land began. Cedar Ridge Estates had grown along the eastern boundary while my uncle was alive. I knew there was an HOA over there. I knew they had houses, sidewalks, a pool, and one of those stone entrance signs that makes a neighborhood sound more important than it is. But I had never paid much attention to it because my uncle always said the same thing. They can build whatever they want on their side. Then I reached the South Ridge and saw their clubhouse. It was not near my land. It was on it. At first, I thought the county GIS map on my tablet was lagging or wrong. I was standing at the edge of a large asphalt parking lot with white lines, decorative lights, and a sign that said, Cedar Ridge Clubhouse, residents only, private HOA property. Behind it sat a 2-story clubhouse with stone columns, glass doors, a fitness room, a covered patio, and a pool sparkling behind a black metal fence. There were pickleball courts to the right, a playground to the left, and a paved walking trail curving into the trees behind everything. Those trees were mine. The parking lot was mine. The clubhouse was sitting directly inside my newly inherited parcel. I stood there holding my deed folder, while 2 women in tennis clothes walked past me, like I was the trespasser. A maintenance guy rolled a trash bin toward the back gate. Kids laughed from the pool area. Music played softly from outdoor speakers attached to a building that, according to my records, had no business existing there. Then Karen arrived. I did not know her name yet, but I knew the type instantly. White SUV, HOA badge clipped to her blazer, sunglasses, phone in one hand, and an expression already annoyed before she asked a single question. "Can I help you?" she said. I looked at the clubhouse, then back at my tablet. "I'm trying to figure out why this building is on my land." She gave a short laugh. Not surprised, not worried, just offended. "This is HOA property," she said. "You're in a residence-only area." I pulled the recorded deed from my folder. I inherited the acreage next door. The county parcel map shows this structure inside my boundary. Her smile tightened. "That clubhouse has been here for 8 years. That doesn't make it yours." She looked me up and down like my boots. Dust and paper folder proved I did not belong near her polished amenity. "You can't inherit what the community already owns," she said. That was the first time she lied to my face. Maybe she believed it. Maybe she had said it so many times that it felt true. Maybe every resident at Cedar Ridge believed the clubhouse had been properly transferred from the developer, handed over to the HOA, insured, maintained, and protected like any other common area. But I had just spent months reading the estate files. I knew what the deed said. I knew what the tax map showed. I knew my uncle had paid taxes on that land until the day he died. Karen stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You need to leave before I call security. We've had enough issues with people wandering in from undeveloped land." I looked past her at the private HOA property sign bolted into my soil. "Call whoever you want," I said, "but you might want to call your attorney first." By the end of that day, I had photographed the clubhouse, the pool, the parking lot, the trail, the sign, and every utility box I could see. By the end of the week, A licensed surveyor would confirm what my tablet already showed. The Cedar Ridge HOA clubhouse was not a little over the line. It was squatting on my land. And by the time the residents found out their dues had been maintaining a community asset they did not legally own, Karen would stop calling me a trespasser. She would start calling me a threat. My uncle never called the land an investment. He called it the place. Not the ranch, not the timber tract, not the future development parcel, just the place. It had belonged to my family long before Cedar Ridge Estates existed. The original acreage came from my grandfather, then passed through my uncle, after a family buyout nobody talked about without sighing. It was not fancy land. Some of it was pasture, some of it was pine, and some of it was rocky and hard to use. There was an old barn with one good wall, 2 ponds that turned green in August, and an abandoned cattle chute near the north fence. But it was ours. My uncle kept it mostly untouched. He leased a small section for hay for a few years, let a neighbor hunt deer during the season, and sold timber once when medical bills got high. Other than that, he protected the land by leaving it alone. He believed trees needed fewer promises than people. When developers started buying nearby parcels, he got suspicious. Not loud, not dramatic, just watchful. He kept copies of every survey. He marked old corners with metal posts and orange paint. He saved tax receipts in folders by year. He never trusted subdivision maps because he said developers liked making empty land look like a future common area before they actually owned it. I used to think he was paranoid. Then I inherited his files. Inside his office, there were drawers full of maps, deeds, boundary sketches, county letters, timber contracts, and photographs of fence corners that looked meaningless until I needed them. One folder had Cedar Ridge written across the tab. Inside were old notices from the developer, 2 unanswered purchase offers, and 1 letter where my uncle had underlined a sentence in red ink. Proposed amenity tract, pending final boundary confirmation. Under it he had written, "They do not own this." That sentence sat in my head after I found the clubhouse. Cedar Ridge had been marketed as a high-end rural community, with resort-style amenities, big lots, stone gates, nature trails, a pool, a fitness room, pickleball courts, and a clubhouse for events. It was branded as a perfect blend of country charm and modern living. Their website made it sound like the HOA had been born with every single acre under control. But from my uncle's records, the story looked different. The developer had bought land east of my family's acreage. At some point, they wanted a strip along the boundary for amenities and trail access. They contacted my uncle. He refused the first offer. They sent another. He ignored it. Then his health declined, and the file went quiet. Cedar Ridge kept building. The houses went up, the entrance was finished, the HOA formed, and the clubhouse appeared on the edge, where developer marketing maps had shown a future amenity tract. Everyone assumed the land deal had happened. It had not. That is how mistakes become normal. A sign goes up, a pool opens, residents pay dues, a board holds meetings, and children have birthday parties under a pavilion. New homeowners get welcome packets, showing the clubhouse as common property. Year after year, use turns into belief. But belief is not a deed. I did not inherit the land because I wanted to fight an HOA. I inherited it because my uncle had no children and trusted me not to sell the whole place to the first developer who waved money around. I had my own life, my own job, and no desire to spend months in county offices arguing over maps. My plan was simple: confirm the boundaries, repair gates, update the insurance, keep taxes current, and decide slowly what to do with the property. I did not expect to find $1 million clubhouse sitting on it, and I definitely did not expect the HOA president to tell me the community owned it because they had used it long enough. That idea bothered me more than the building itself, because if people can point at land they used without permission and call it a common area, then anyone with enough confidence, enough residents, and enough landscaping can turn private property into a community habit. My uncle understood that danger. That was why he saved everything. The deed, the tax records, the old surveys, the letters, the rejected offers, the hand-marked maps, and the notes warning that Cedar Ridge did not own the amenity strip. He had been gone less than a year, and someone was already standing on his land, telling me the community had absorbed it. If you have ever watched a neighbor, HOA, developer, or board member call private land a common area, just because people got comfortable using it, you know how quickly anger turns into focus. You stop thinking about arguing. You start thinking about evidence. That is what I did. I closed my uncle's folder, made copies of everything, and scheduled a survey. Because Cedar Ridge had a clubhouse, but my family had the records. Karen's first official letter arrived 3 days after I photographed the clubhouse. It came from the HOA management company, but her fingerprints were all over it. The letter accused me of entering private HOA property, disturbing residents, photographing minors near the pool, and making unsupported claims about community assets. It demanded that I stop harassing staff, stay out of the clubhouse area, and direct all future communication to the HOA attorney. At the bottom, in bold, it said, "Cedar Ridge Clubhouse is a long-established HOA amenity." Long established, that was their entire defense, dressed up as a sentence. I wrote back through my attorney. We denied the harassment claim, identified the parcel by legal description, attached my recorded deed, and requested all documents supporting HOA ownership of the clubhouse land: deeds, easements, licenses, leases, developer turnover documents, title policies, anything. The response did not include a deed. It included confidence. Karen called an emergency board meeting and invited me to attend for clarification. I went because my attorney said listening could be useful, and he was right. The meeting was held inside the clubhouse, on my land. Residents filled the room in golf shirts and sandals. Some had brought children from the pool. A few looked worried. Most looked annoyed. Karen stood near the front with a microphone and introduced me not as the inherited landowner, but as the neighboring claimant. Claimant, another word people use when they do not want to say owner. She told residents that Cedar Ridge had maintained the clubhouse for 8 years, paid insurance, collected dues, hosted events, and relied on the facility as a central amenity. She said an individual had recently inherited adjacent acreage and was now attempting to disrupt the community by challenging long-settled property boundaries. Then she looked directly at me. "Possession matters," she said. A few residents clapped. I did not respond. Not yet. A board member asked if I intended to shut down the pool. A parent asked if their kids were safe. Another resident asked whether home values would drop. Someone called me a land grabber, which was impressive considering the HOA building was sitting on my parcel. Karen let the room get angry before she offered the solution she wanted. She said the HOA would defend its amenities, protect property values, and pursue legal remedies if I continued making demands. She claimed the county had permitted the clubhouse, the developer had delivered it as part of the community, and the association had relied on that for years. I raised my hand. Karen hesitated, then let me speak. I kept it simple. "Show me the deed." The room quieted faster than I expected. Karen said, "The association's ownership is documented in the original development approvals." "That's not a deed," I said. She said, "The clubhouse was part of the approved community plan." "That's not a deed." She said, "Residents have paid for it for 8 years." "That is also not a deed." Her face reddened. Then she said, "You are not going to steal a clubhouse from families because of a technicality." I looked around the room. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm asking why your clubhouse is on land my uncle paid taxes on until he died." That was the first time some residents looked uncertain. After the meeting, HOA security followed me to the parking lot. One guard told me I could not return without permission. I asked if he had a copy of the HOA parcel boundary. He said he followed board instructions. That was honest, at least. I spent the next week walking the edge outside the clubhouse area, where I could safely access it from my land. I found more than I expected. The asphalt parking lot extended past the visible tree line. The pool equipment pad sat deep inside the disputed area. A paved walking trail curved beyond the clubhouse into the timber, with little signs saying, Cedar Ridge Nature Loop. There were benches, dog waste stations, irrigation lines, landscape beds, and a decorative split-rail fence that made my family's land look like HOA parkland. They had not just built a structure, they had branded the land. Karen sent another letter after I photographed the trail. This one accused me of creating anxiety among residents and interfering with peaceful community use. It warned that any attempt to block access, lock gates, or disturb amenities would result in legal action. I had not blocked anything. I had not locked anything. I had not touched their building. I was doing exactly what people like Karen hate most. I was documenting every sign, every improvement, every email, every threat, and every public statement, calling the clubhouse an HOA asset. I kept records of every resident newsletter, advertising pool parties, rental events, fitness classes, and private resident access. I gathered every dollar amount I could find in budgets showing dues used for the maintenance of a building on my land. Karen thought possession mattered. I agreed. Then the records would matter more. The first title search answered the most important question. No deed had ever transferred the clubhouse parcel to Cedar Ridge HOA. Not one. My attorney ordered a full title review going back decades. We traced my uncle's ownership, my grandfather's ownership, boundary descriptions, tax parcel changes, old right-of-way notes, and every recorded document tied to the subdivision. The developer had recorded plats for Cedar Ridge Estates. It had conveyed residential lots. It had conveyed certain common areas. It had recorded drainage easements, utility easements, and road dedications. But the strip under the clubhouse was not among them. There was no deed from my uncle, no purchase agreement that closed, no recorded easement allowing a clubhouse, no lease, no license, no condemnation, no court order, and no boundary line agreement. Nothing. The only thing we found was a trail of intention. Marketing maps, planning notes, a proposed amenity tract, a developer memo referencing ongoing discussions with an adjacent landowner, and a preliminary site plan showing the clubhouse near the edge of the project. Then, somehow, the intention had hardened into construction. The county records were not as clean as they should have been. The permit file listed the project as Cedar Ridge Clubhouse and Pool. The applicant was the developer, not the HOA at first. The site plan showed a boundary line, but it did not match the legal description in my uncle's deed. It treated the amenity area as if it belonged to the development, but the permit file did not include a deed proving that. The county had reviewed construction plans, setbacks, pool fencing, electrical, plumbing, accessibility, and occupancy issues. It had not guaranteed title. That distinction would become everything. A building permit is not a magic wand. It does not transfer ownership. It does not cure a bad boundary. It does not let someone build on another person's parcel just because the drawing looked official. My surveyor, Alicia, was the one who made the mistake visible. She was calm, precise, and deeply unimpressed by the clubhouse. She spent 2 days locating old monuments, comparing legal descriptions, pulling measurements from the subdivision plat, checking aerial references, and walking the timber edge with equipment that cost more than my truck. Karen came out the second morning. She asked why survey stakes were being placed near the pool fence. Alicia said, "Because that is where the boundary is." Karen said, "This facility has been part of Cedar Ridge for years." Alicia did not look up. Surveys don't measure years. I wrote that one down too. When the final survey exhibit arrived, even I stared at it for a long time. The clubhouse sat entirely on my parcel. The pool and patio were on my parcel. Most of the parking lot was on my parcel. The pickleball court straddled the line, with the larger portion on my side. The walking trail ran deep into my acreage for nearly half a mile before looping back toward the subdivision. Cedar Ridge did not have a minor encroachment. It had built its main amenity center on land it never acquired. My attorney sent a demand letter that afternoon. It required the HOA to stop claiming ownership, preserve records, produce all insurance documents, disclose revenue and dues spent on the clubhouse, provide developer turnover documents, cease expansion of trails or amenities, and enter negotiations for removal, lease, or purchase. It also demanded reimbursement of all legal, title, and survey costs. The letter went to the HOA, the management company, the current board, the developer's successor entity, the county planning office, and the HOA's insurance carrier. Karen's response came through another community email. She said the HOA was facing an aggressive attempt to take away beloved amenities from families. She said the board would not allow an outsider to steal the heart of Cedar Ridge. She said the clubhouse had been used openly for 8 years, and that the association would explore all defenses. All defenses. That meant adverse possession was coming. My attorney expected it. He explained the reality to me before they even raised it. Using someone else's land for years does not automatically make it yours. Adverse possession has specific elements, specific timelines, and specific hurdles, especially when the true owner has consistently paid taxes, when the use began under mistaken assumptions from a developer, when the HOA cannot show a clear hostile claim against the owner, and when recorded documents directly contradict their story. Karen wanted residents to believe time was a deed. It was not. Then the insurance carrier asked for proof of ownership, or a valid insurable interest in the land under the clubhouse. The HOA sent them the same documents they had sent us. No deed. That was when Cedar Ridge's problem became bigger than me. Because a pool, clubhouse, parking lot, trail, and courts sitting on private land create more than a boundary dispute. They create a massive liability issue. If someone slipped at the pool, whose land were they on? If a tree fell on the trail, who controlled it? If a resident rented the clubhouse for an event, what exactly was the HOA renting? Karen had spent weeks calling me the threat, but the real threat was the empty space in their title file where a deed should have been. The title officer said it in the driest voice imaginable. I don't see a conveyance. We were in a conference room with my attorney, the HOA attorney, a representative from the management company, Karen, 2 board members, and a title officer hired to review the amenity records. Everyone had copies of the same packet: deeds, plats, surveys, permits, turnover documents, tax maps, and the HOA's own governing documents. Karen had arrived confident. She left pale. The title officer walked through the chain of title page by page. The developer had acquired land for Cedar Ridge, subdivided it, transferred certain streets and common areas, created the HOA, promised amenities, and built them. But it had never recorded a deed transferring the clubhouse land. The proposed amenity tract shown in early planning documents overlapped my uncle's property. There were references to a pending acquisition. There were internal notes about boundary coordination. There was even one unsigned draft purchase agreement from years ago, naming my uncle as the seller and the developer as the buyer. Unsigned, unclosed, unrecorded. My uncle had never sold. The title officer said, "The HOA may have believed it received this asset, but belief is not reflected in the land records." Karen interrupted, "But the clubhouse is insured. We've maintained it. The county approved it. Residents have paid dues for years." The title officer looked at her. "None of those are deeds." That sentence felt like the whole case condensed into 4 words. The HOA attorney tried to shift toward adverse possession, prescriptive rights, equitable arguments, reliance, and community hardship. My attorney let him talk. Then he pointed to my uncle's tax records. Every single year was fully paid. No abandonment, no tax sale, no transfer, and no notice that the HOA claimed ownership. He pointed to the developer's own memo saying the acquisition was pending. Pending means not done. He pointed to the survey and highlighted the complete absence of any recorded instrument giving Cedar Ridge the right to build, occupy, or control the land. Then he asked the question that made the room silent. If the HOA owns it, where is the document that says so? Nobody answered. Karen tried a different angle. She said my uncle should have objected earlier. My attorney replied that an owner is not required to patrol 1,600 acres daily to prevent a developer from building on the wrong side of a boundary. She said the community would be devastated. He replied that devastation did not transfer title. She said I was trying to profit from a mistake. He replied that the HOA had profited from using land it did not own. The board members stopped defending her after that. One of them asked the management company whether the developer turnover package included title insurance for the Clubhouse parcel. The manager said she would need to check. The title officer said if such a policy existed, she had not seen it. The insurance representative on the call said coverage would be reviewed pending confirmation of an insurable interest and legal occupancy. That phrase rattled everyone. Legal occupancy. The pool could not operate comfortably if the HOA could not prove it had a legal right to occupy the land. The clubhouse could not be rented confidently. The trail could not be advertised as HOA property. The parking lot could not remain unquestioned. Every event, every amenity reservation, and every resident use now came with heavy legal uncertainty. Karen's strongest argument had been that the clubhouse was too established to challenge. But the longer it had been used, the larger their past use problem became. 8 years of dues allocated to maintenance, 8 years of pool parties, 8 years of private rentals, and 8 years of residents being told it was theirs. It was 8 years of an HOA asset, sitting entirely on land my uncle paid taxes on. The county planning office opened a review after receiving the survey and title packet. The county did not decide ownership, but it did review whether the approved site plan matched actual property control and whether continued public or semi-public use raised safety, access, and compliance concerns. The pool inspector asked for updated ownership documentation. The HOA could not provide it. The insurance carrier issued a reservation of rights. The management company advised the board to suspend clubhouse rentals and limit access pending legal review. Karen called that an overreaction. The board called it risk management. That was when she truly lost control. For weeks, she had told residents I was trying to take away their clubhouse. But once the title officer confirmed there was no deed, the question completely changed. It was no longer, why is this man attacking us? It became, how did our board let us maintain a clubhouse we never owned? And more importantly, who knew? The emergency HOA meeting was the first time I saw Karen afraid of her own residents. Not physically afraid, but politically afraid. The clubhouse was closed that evening, so the meeting had to be held in the elementary school cafeteria down the road. That detail alone made people angry. The whole point of paying dues for a clubhouse was not having to sit under fluorescent lights beside a folded basketball hoop, listening to lawyers explain why your community pool might be on someone else's land. The room was packed. Parents, retirees, new homeowners, former board members, and real estate agents who lived in the neighborhood. These were people who had reserved the clubhouse for birthdays, graduation parties, retirement dinners, and HOA meetings. They were people who had paid premium prices because Cedar Ridge advertised resort-style amenities. Karen sat at the front table with the remaining board members. She did not have the microphone at first. The HOA attorney did. He explained that a boundary and title dispute had arisen concerning the clubhouse parcel. He said the board was reviewing records, communicating with insurance, and evaluating options. He said residents should avoid speculation. That narrative lasted less than 10 seconds. A man in the second row stood up and asked, Do we own the clubhouse land or not? The attorney said ownership was under review. The room erupted. A woman shouted, "That means no." Another resident asked whether pool access was suspended because of liability. A parent asked what would have happened if a child had been injured there. Someone else asked whether the HOA had collected dues under false pretenses. A newer homeowner asked if this should have been disclosed during purchase. A former board member asked why the developer turnover packet had not been audited. Then someone asked the question Karen dreaded most. Who verified the deed? No one answered. Karen took the microphone. She said the clubhouse had always been understood as a Cedar Ridge amenity. She said the board relied on developer representations. She said the community had openly maintained the facility for years. She said an outside landowner had appeared after an inheritance and was using a technicality to demand money. A resident near the aisle raised a copy of the survey. Is the building on his parcel? Karen said the survey was only one interpretation. That was a massive mistake. My surveyor was in the room because my attorney had asked her to attend if residents had factual questions. She stood up and said calmly, "It is not an interpretation. It is a boundary survey based on recorded legal descriptions." The cafeteria got quiet. Then my attorney spoke. He explained that I had inherited the acreage legally, that my uncle had paid taxes, that no recorded deed transferred the clubhouse land to the HOA, and that we were not asking residents to panic. We were asking the HOA to stop claiming ownership it could not prove, and to resolve the encroachment lawfully. Karen accused him of threatening the community. He replied, "The threat is not the deed. The threat is 8 years of pretending there was one." That line traveled through Cedar Ridge faster than any newsletter Karen had ever written. The county's involvement made things harder for the HOA. It requested updated site information, proof of legal control for continued amenity operations, and clarification of access and liability responsibilities. The pool could not simply reopen as if nothing had happened. The trail through my acreage had to be closed immediately because there was no easement allowing residents to use it. The parking area became a heavy negotiation point. The pickleball courts were fenced off pending review. Residents started organizing. Some wanted to sue the developer, some wanted to sue the old board, and some wanted to sue Karen personally. Some wanted the HOA to buy the land at any cost, because losing the clubhouse would heavily damage every home value in Cedar Ridge. Others wanted to tear it down and stop paying lawyers. The insurance carrier pushed for a standstill agreement. My attorney agreed to temporary, limited access for safety inspections and preservation, but absolutely no recreational use. No pool parties, no rentals, no resident events, no trail access, no marketing the clubhouse as available, and no new improvements. Karen called that unreasonable. The board completely overruled her. A week later, internal emails leaked. One message from the year before showed a resident asking Karen whether the wooded area behind the clubhouse belonged to Cedar Ridge or the neighboring acreage. Karen replied that the boundary was not a practical concern because the clubhouse had long been treated as HOA property. Another email showed the management company recommending a title review before expanding the walking trail. Karen responded that involving title lawyers would create unnecessary obstacles. Unnecessary obstacles. That phrase effectively ended her presidency. At the next board session, she was asked to resign. She refused, and residents petitioned for her removal. Before the vote could happen, she stepped down, claiming she was being scapegoated for developer mistakes. Maybe the developer started the mess, but Karen had protected it, advertised it, ignored warnings, and attacked the person holding the deed. Now the HOA had 3 options: remove the clubhouse and restore my land, lease the land from me under a recorded agreement, or buy the clubhouse parcel at a price I was willing to accept. For the first time, nobody at Cedar Ridge was pretending they could force the 4th option, taking it for free. The HOA did not want to demolish the clubhouse. That was obvious from the first real settlement meeting. The building was too central to the community. It appeared in every sales brochure, every welcome packet, every home listing, and every resident event photo. Removing it would heavily tank property values, trigger massive lawsuits, and make Cedar Ridge famous for all the wrong reasons. They also could not keep using it without resolving ownership. That left exactly one path. They had to buy the land. Not at the old raw acreage price Karen wanted, not at agricultural value, and not at whatever number made the board feel less embarrassed. The parcel under and around the clubhouse was no longer just dirt. It was the land beneath their main amenity: pool, parking, courts, and community identity. They had built the value directly into my property and then acted shocked when the price reflected that. My attorney negotiated hard. The final agreement carved out a defined clubhouse parcel and a narrow access area from my 1,600 acres. The HOA purchased that parcel at a premium price, paid substantial past use compensation, reimbursed all of my survey, title, and legal costs, paid for permanent fencing and signage, closed the unauthorized trail through the rest of my acreage, and recorded strict boundary documents, preventing any future expansion without a written agreement. They also had to correct their governing documents and resident maps. The words HOA property came off anything outside the purchased parcel. The Cedar Ridge nature loop was heavily shortened. The benches on my acreage were removed. The dog waste stations disappeared, and the split rail fence was completely moved. A new boundary fence went in, this time exactly where the survey said it belonged. On my side, I installed signs every few hundred feet along the edge. Private land no HOA access boundary verified by survey. One sign near the old trail entrance said, "Common area ends here." That one became highly popular online after a resident posted a photo of it. Karen moved out 6 months later. I heard she claimed the community had turned against her for simply trying to protect amenities. Maybe that was how she needed to remember it. People like Karen rarely say, "I was wrong." They say the situation was complicated, others failed them, or no one could have known. They say they relied on history, assumptions, and good faith. But the deed had always been there. My uncle's tax receipts had always been there. The rejected purchase offers had always been there. And the developer memo saying, "pending acquisition," had always been right there. The only thing missing was the one document Cedar Ridge needed most: a deed transferring the land. The HOA eventually reopened the clubhouse after recording the purchase. Residents went back to swimming, playing pickleball, and booking events. From the outside, it looked like Cedar Ridge recovered, but it cost them a massive special assessment, an intense insurance review, heavy legal fees, developer litigation, management changes, new title audits for every amenity, and new rules requiring strict board approval and legal review before any project ever touched boundary land. They now have a permanent reminder along the western edge that the forest beyond the fence is not theirs, had never been theirs, and would not become theirs through habit. As for me, I kept the rest of the 1,600 acres. I repaired the old gate, cleared the north trail, and found my uncle's orange-painted corner posts, half swallowed by vines, repainting them brighter than before. I put his Cedar Ridge folder back in the file cabinet, but I added the final recorded agreement right behind his old note. They do not own this. Under it, I wrote, "Now they know." I did not inherit land to punish a neighborhood. I did not wake up hoping to threaten a clubhouse, close a pool, or scare families about home values. But I also did not inherit 1,600 acres so an HOA could keep whatever part it found convenient, and call my objection a technicality. A building does not prove ownership. A sign does not prove ownership. A pool full of residents does not prove ownership. 8 years of dues do not prove ownership. A confident HOA president with a microphone does not prove ownership. The deed does. And when the deed, the tax records, the title search, and the survey all say the exact same thing, the loudest board meeting in the world cannot change the boundary. That was the lesson Cedar Ridge learned the expensive way. A common area is not whatever residents have gotten used to using. It is land legally conveyed, recorded, insured, and controlled by the association. If an HOA cannot show the deed, it should not be calling anything theirs. And if you ever inherit land, even land that looks empty, wild, forgotten, or too big for anyone to constantly monitor, do not assume the boundaries are safe just because nobody has called. Walk the lines, pull the records, check the tax maps, order the surveys, and read the old letters. Because sometimes the most valuable thing on your land is not timber, water, minerals, or development potential. Sometimes it is the building somebody else was foolish enough to put there. If you have ever seen an HOA, neighbor, or developer treat private property like a common area just because they used it for years, leave your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who owns land. Save it as a reminder to check the records. And subscribe for more stories where patience, paperwork, and property lines make the right people pay.